Hi, I'm Kris and I've been teaching environmental education now for 30 years and thought we might go on a hike over at Haw Ridge today. I'm going to talk about different flowers that we're going to see, and the first one I'll talk about is this little white one here. This is called fleabane, and when you look at it, it looks like it might just be one separate flower, but if we were to pick this and take it apart, it would be hundreds of tiny flowers, just like a daisy or a dandelion or sunflower. Another thing I'd like to talk about is this right here. I'm going to pick it because it's dead. This is a goldenrod gall, and actually it's a duplex because it's got one on top. This was made by a wasp last year. The mother wasp laid her egg on the goldenrod stem, and when the egg hatched, the larva buried into the stem. There's a chemical in its saliva that makes the plant grow like a tumor. And so the little larva lives inside this, and it will, I always like to tell my students, it will eat his bedroom. So in the fall, when it gets ready to come out, it will chew a hole in the stem, or in the gall, and then it will come out as an adult later on the next year. Okay, this wildflower right here is called Solomon seal, and there's a true Solomon seal and a false Solomon seal. This is the true one. The flowers hang down below the leaves. On the false Solomon seal, the flowers will be at the end. Later on in the fall, we will have purple berries on here. The reason it's called Solomon seal is if you dig up the plant and break the root off, it's supposed to look like the seal of Solomon in the Bible. This is lemon trillium or yellow trillium. The fragrance of this is very lemony. It's very nice smell. If you get a whole lot of them, you can actually smell it in the woods. It's called Trillium because it has all three parts. It's got 3 leaves, 3 sepals, and 3 petals. This is blue phlox. It's a very common, very pretty wildflower we have here in the springtime. If you look up closely on this, you're going to see a white area around the hole. Those are called nectar guides, and they will show the pollinators, especially butterflies, where to find their food, the nectar. A few weeks ago, we took our granddaughter on a walk over here, and I told her we have dolphins in the woods here. And she said, dolphins? I said, yeah, this plant right here, this dwarf larkspur, when you see the buds on it, they look like little dolphins. And the scientific name for it is delphinium. All larkspurs are very poisonous, so you don't want to be eating these. It's a very beautiful dark purple flower. We're getting a little late in the season now for the wildflowers, but I did find a larkspur here that has the 2 little dolphins on it. So you can see the buds at the top of the stem, and they will open later on this week. This is one of those flowers that sometimes you smell before you see. It's called Carrion flower for a very good reason, because it smells like a dead animal. This is one of those plants that we call a dioecious plant. It's either male or female. This one happens to be the male flower. The way I can tell is because it has stamens. This one is going to make the pollen. So this is a carrion flower vine. There's also a carrion flower that grows about this tall. During one of my recent wildflower hikes, I showed this plant to somebody and they said, oh, is that a clover or shamrock? And I said, no, even though it's got 3 leaflets, it's not a shamrock. This is called violet wood sorrel. And it's related to what we call sour grass, the little yellow plant that grows as a weed in your yard. It does have oxalic acid in it, so it has a very sharp taste to it. This is some of the biggest poison ivy I've ever seen in my life. The leaves are just about the size of my hand. You've probably heard the saying, leaves of 3, leave it be. These are actually 1 leaf with 3 leaflets. Poison ivy has an oil in it called erythritol that will make people who are allergic to it itch very badly, and it causes very bad blisters that will break open, and it can make you very, very miserable. So it's a really good idea if you're going to be out in the woods to learn what poison ivy looks like. There's lots of plants that have 3 leaflets, but they're not all poison ivy. We've only gone less than 100 yards and we've already seen several different wildflowers. This is a really pretty one. This is called Blue Star or Blue Dogbane, and you'll see a few of these scattered around in the woods. This plant right here is called Squall Root. I like to call it bear's X-lax because when bears come out of hibernation, they will eat this plant to help clear out their digestive system. Before bears go into hibernation, they will eat twigs and leaves to stop themselves up so that they don't defecate in their burrow when they're hibernating. This is an interesting plant because it's a parasite. It's parasitic on oak trees. If you notice, it's not green, it's all yellow. It doesn't have any leaves, so it has to get its nutrients from something else, and where it gets it is from the roots of oak trees. This is a Virginia creeper vine. A lot of people get it confused with poison ivy, but when I was in Girl Scouts, we learned leaves of 3, leave it be. If it's got 5 leaves, you can shake hands with it. The Virginia creeper vine is hairy, sort of like the poison ivy vine, but they're larger holding roots, and the top part of it is smooth. Later on I'll show the poison ivy vine. The entire vine is very, very hairy, and the holding roots are much thinner. This vine is growing on a honey locust tree, and there's several different types of locusts. So the way I remember this one is it's got these really big thorns. I think of a bee having a stinger. These are kind of like stingers, and bees make honey, so this is a honey locust. This one is hollow, and if I pull this thorn off, if I can, you'll notice that there's been insects in here, most likely ants. So a lot of times the ants will live in these hollow thorns, and they'll help to protect the tree. These pretty heart-shaped leaves are called little brown jugs, and it's a type of wild ginger. The flower, it grows on the ground, and in the case of the little brown jugs, they're not completely open. These are pollinated by fungus, gnats, and ants, and in the fall when these go to seed, the seeds have a gelatinous coating on it. The ants will take that back to their nest, eat the gelatinous coating off, and the seed is left underground to sprout. If you pinch off one of these leaves to smell it, it has a very fragrant aroma to it. It smells a lot like sassafras. I like to teach people to use their nose for smelling different plants, because a lot of plants can be identified by their smell. This is wild geranium, and it's a very common wildflower here in East Tennessee. The seed pods are very interesting because they have 5 different seeds in them. And if you get a close-up of the pistil of the flower, the female part, you'll notice that it has 5 parts to it. So when the pollen is taken from one flower to the next, the flower is pollinated and the seeds are able to grow. Once these have developed and matured, they will pop and open up and throw their seeds. Oh, this is the female carrion flower vine. As I mentioned a while ago, this plant is dioecious. It's either male or female. The female is not the fairer sex. She does not smell any better than the male does. This one, once these flowers have been pollinated, will make berries in the fall. This is a jack-in-the-pulpit. We've been looking for these. It looks a lot like a trillium if it doesn't have the flower. One of the interesting things about jack-in-the-pulpit is, just like the carrion flower vine we saw a minute ago, it's a dioecious plant. So the flower is either male or female. Usually the young plants start out with a male flower. It takes less energy to make pollen than it does to make the berries. A lot of times the male flower will only have one leaf, where the female flower will have 2 leaves. So the little maroon knobs that you just saw are the male flowers. They're going to produce the pollen. Small flies will come to this and take the pollen to the female flower. The hood is called the spathe, and Jack is called the spadix. This pretty little yellow flower is called hairy joint meadow parsnip, and you can see that it's got what we call umbels, like an umbrella. These plants are in the carrot family. This plant is called sweet anise root. It looks a lot like sweet sesame, which can make it very confusing. But if you really want to know if you've got sweet anise root, pinch off a little piece of leaf, crush it, smell it, and it smells like licorice. We found another member of the carrot family. This one is called smooth meadow parsnip. And if you look at the umbels on this, they're a little bit different. They're not separated as much as the other ones are. This is called Hoya Pacoon. The word pacoon in one of the native languages meant red, although it is orange. This is related to forget-me-nots, and that's because of the shape of the flower stalk. This plant right here is called robin plantain, and unfortunately it's just about past its peak right now. It looks a lot like daisies or dandelions. We also have a very tiny flower here. This is called Seneca's snake root, and it's one of the milkworts. The little flowers, when they bloom, look a lot like tiny white butterflies. This is wild raspberry, and it looks a lot like a blackberry, but one of the easiest ways to tell is to look at the stem. The stem has sort of a whitish blush to it. Later on this season, this is going to have some delicious raspberries on it. If you're ever in the woods and you need an emergency whistle, just find an acorn cap. You put it behind your thumbs like this and blow down like a flute. Right now we're in a cedar barren. If you look around, you can see a lot of cedar trees in this area. There's a lot of limestone, and so there's certain plants that grow in cedar barrens that you don't find anywhere else in the woods. This particular flower right here is called pale blue-eyed grass. There's another wildflower called blue-eyed grass that's a lot darker blue. The pale is only found in cedar barrens. This little white flower is called Bluets. They're the large bluet. They're in the madder family. And later on in our hike, we might get to see the Quaker ladies' bluets. They are smaller. The flowers are bigger, but the plant is smaller. So we'll look for that as we go along. When you're learning about wildflowers, it always helps to be able to look at the leaf. At first glance, this would look a whole lot like the Indian strawberry, the weed that probably grows in your yard. But Indian strawberry has 3 leaflets, where this plant is called cinquefoil, and it has 5 leaflets. Cinq in French means 5. It's in the rose family. This is called golden ragwort. And just like the robin plantain that we talked about a while ago, it's another composite. It's made up of hundreds of tiny flowers. The little ones in the middle we call disc flowers, and the petals are another type of flower called a ray flower. Composites are very good for butterflies and bees because each one of those tiny flowers will produce a tiny bit of nectar. This is a type of mint. And if you look real closely on the inside of it, you're going to see some little tiny purple dots. These purple dots are nectar guides, and they're kind of like little road maps to show the pollinators where to go to find their food. This is called a sassafras tree, And one of the ways it's really easy to tell a sassafras tree is because it has 3 different kinds of leaves. It has what we call an entire leaf, just a plain leaf like this. It also has a mitten leaf, so it has a little lobe like that. And then it also has what I call the Mr. Spock leaf, which is a 3-lobed leaf like this. The only other tree that I know of here in Tennessee that has 3 different types of leaves like this is the mulberry. The sassafras, if you gently scratch the stem on it, has a very nice fragrance to it. This is called crossvine, and it's related to the orange trumpet creeper vine. Both of these are very good for hummingbirds if you want to attract hummingbirds to your yard. The vine, this particular vine, has tendrils on it, and it uses these little curlicues to hang on to the plant that it's growing on. This one is growing on a redbud tree. Redbuds are easy to identify because they have heart-shaped leaves. Now we've gotten out of the cedar barren and we're down in the hardwood forest. And here we've found some blue-eyed grass that I talked about earlier. This is different than the pale blue-eyed grass. This is called mullein. It's not a native plant. It was brought over here from Europe. The Native Americans found out that this makes nice Dr. Scholl's pads. They would put the leaves, these large leaves, in their moccasins to help pad their bottom of their feet. The Quaker girls were not allowed to wear makeup, so they would take these leaves and rub it on their cheeks, and it would irritate their skin and make their cheeks rosy and red. So they called it Quaker rouge. This is called a biennial plant, which means it comes up from the leaves the first year. The second year it will send up a large flower stalk. When the flower stalks die back and dry off, the Romans would use those. They would dip them in tallow. In fact, here's one right here. They would dip these in tallow and use them as torches. These make thousands and thousands of tiny seeds, as you can see here in my hand. The seeds can stay dormant in the soil for up to 100 years before they will sprout. I don't advocate picking flowers, but this is a non-native, it's a weed, a common weed. This is white clover. And I like to show people what happens with this. Each one of these little white flowers is a separate flower. If it gets visited by a bee or a butterfly and they get pollinated, the flower will close up, it turns pink, and it drops down. This is the way the plant communicates with its pollinators, that it does not need to be visited anymore once these flowers close up. A while ago we saw the raspberry, the wild raspberry. The flowers were much smaller on that. The stem was much smoother and it didn't have as many thorns on it. Or actually, these are called prickles on the blackberries and roses. These white flowers, if they get pollinated, will become those juicy black berries that we like to pick in the summertime, around the 4th of July. Plants are smart enough not to get sunburned in the spring, unlike humans. So if you look closely, you'll see that this little red maple has 2 small red leaves at the top. All plants have different plant pigments in them. Red pigments are always in these leaves, but once the chlorophyll comes in, the green will mask that. So the red pigments are called anthocyanins. They're in there all year, but in the fall, once the chlorophyll will disappear, then those red pigments come out again, and we enjoy those beautiful colors in the fall. This is one plant I really don't like to see in the woods. This is called Bittersweet. A lot of times people like to use the seeds in the fall for decorations because they're orange and yellow and very, very pretty. But it's highly invasive. It will smother these trees and kill them eventually. So this is a very highly invasive non-native. We're on the bike ramp here and just happened to spot this gray beard tongue. Gray beard tongue is one of the snapdragons, and if you look real closely in here you can see some little tiny purple lines. Those are those nectar guides that we talked about earlier. And there's some little fuzzy yellow parts in there. That's the beard part. Bluets are one of my favorite little spring wildflowers. We saw the large bluets a while ago. These are the Quaker ladies that I talked about. And they've got very tiny leaves down at the, what we call basal leaves down at the bottom where the stems come out. This is called Cumberland Spurge, and I said it should have been the official flower of the women's movement because this flower has a superior ovary. That just simply means that the ovary, which is the part that makes the seeds, grows out on a stalk above the rest of the flower instead of being below it. This is in the same family as poinsettias, so it's a euphorbia, and it's kind of a hard little flower to see, but it's fairly common in the East Tennessee area. This is a little succulent called stonecrop, and a lot of times you will see it growing on rocks. This is called bush honeysuckle, and it's a very highly invasive non-native. It causes a lot of problems. It is related to the Japanese honeysuckle, which is also an invasive non-native. This will have 4 little red berries where these flowers are in the fall. Birds like to eat those, and they spread those seeds all over the place. A few minutes ago we talked about the clover and how the flowers close up after they've been pollinated. They drop down and they change colors. Honeysuckle does the same thing. Japanese honeysuckle and the bush honeysuckle, they start out, the flowers, when they open up from the bud, the flowers are white. After they've been pollinated, they turn yellow. This is a signal to the pollinators that these have been fertilized and the insects do not need to come back. Okay, this little red dot that you see on this leaf is called a velvet mite. The good thing is they don't bite people. They are an arachnid, so they're related to spiders, but they're very pretty. They're often seen in the early spring. These heart-shaped leaves are wild ginger, and the flower is a little tiny maroon colored flower down here at the base. It is more open than the little brown jugs are. Anytime you have a flower that is maroon or brown colored, it usually does not have a good smell to it. It has the bad smell to attract beetles and flies as their pollinators. We're in a wetland area. This is where a wet water stream runs through here. And there's a flower that blooms down here that is one of the only places I've ever seen it. It's called wild hyacinth. The leaves look kind of like grass, but it's in the lily family. I don't talk about just wildflowers when I go on a hike. I like to find where animals have been too. And these holes that you see here, we're down in this wetland. If you look down there deep enough, you'll actually see water. These are made by a type of crawfish called a terrestrial crawfish. They don't live in a stream, but they live in the water that's down below these holes. One time I was leading a hike and I was talking about one of these holes, and all of a sudden this crawfish came up and started snapping its pincers at me. I guess he didn't like me in his territory. Okay, this is called a millipede. And if you look closely, it's got hundreds of tiny legs. Millipedes are plant eaters, so they won't harm you. They can't sting like a centipede can. But the way that they protect themselves is by giving off a poisonous liquid. When it first comes out, it looks like iodine, and it smells like iodine. Then later, it will turn the stain purple, so you don't want to mess with these. This is a leaf that does not have a flower with it yet. It's going to have the flower in the fall, but it will not bloom at the same time with the leaf. This is called a crane fly orchid, and one of the easy ways to identify this is to turn it over, and you'll see that the back is a bright purple. This will have brown flowers on a stalk in August, and they look like crane flies. They're brown. It's a very common flower, but they're hard to see because they blend in with the leaves. Anytime you're walking through the field and you see what looks like spit on a plant, it's caused by a little insect called a spittle bug, and it's the nymph, the baby of a type of leafhopper. They suck the juice out of the plant, and then what comes out the back end, they whip up into a foam. And this will protect the little nymph. I'm going to put it back so it doesn't dry out. It will protect it from ants and any other thing that might try to eat it. This plant's really pretty, but it's another highly invasive non-native. It's called Multifloral Rose. And years ago, it was sold as a living fence. So people could plant this, and it would help to keep, I guess, people from trying to break into their house or whatever. It's got lots of little thorns on it. It's, like I said, it's highly invasive, and you will see it all over the place. It's an awful weed. It almost looks like somebody has shot this tree with a gun, but it's not. These little holes right here were made by a woodpecker called a yellow-bellied sapsucker. And what they do is they come in the spring when the sap is rising, and they peck on the tree and make these little holes. They come back a day or two later, and they will drink the sap that oozes out and eat any insects that are caught in it. All right, now we're in a power line cut. TVA keeps the plants cut down here, so it's wide open. There's no trees here, so you've got a lot of sun. And one of the plants that's so pretty here is the wild columbine. And you can see the stamens down here at the bottom. Those are the parts that have the pollen on it. Hummingbirds really like these. Bumblebees like these. The bumblebees have learned a new trick that if they go up here to the end of the spur on these flowers, they'll pierce it with their proboscis and steal the nectar out of there. They don't go up through the plant, so it really doesn't help the plant at all as far as pollination is concerned. This is called lyre leaf sage. These are the leaves down here. I guess somebody thought they looked like a lyre that you would play, not somebody that doesn't tell the truth. Lyre leaf sage is one of the mints, and one of the easy ways to tell a mint is to feel the stem. Mints always have a square stem and opposite leaves. So if you get up close and personal and you feel the stem and it's a square, you know that you have a mint. I came through here a few weeks ago and this American bladdernut tree was in bloom. Now the flowers have gone to seed, and you can see why it's called a bladdernut, because it's got this bladder-shaped fruit. This is a type of fungus that's called turkey tail fungus, and it was starting to decompose this tree. You can always tell when the fungus started growing because it always grows parallel to the ground. So this started growing after this tree fell. The fern on this tree is called a resurrection fern, and the way it got that name is because when it dries up, it curls up and it looks like it's dead. When it rains and it gets wet, it opens back up and sort of comes back to life. On the back side of the fern, ferns do not make flowers, so they have to, the way they reproduce is with spores. And you might be able to see some little tiny brown dots on here. These are what produce the spores. The spores will float through the air, and if they land on a suitable substrate, then they will grow and turn into a new fern. This is called large flowered bellwort, and unfortunately these are just about gone. They have a beautiful yellow flower. They kind of remind me of a ballerina's tutu. There's three different types of bellworts. They've got the large flowered, the perfoliate, and the wild oats. And they all look very similar, but the leaves are different. The leaves on this are very large. You can see that the stem, the leaf grows around the stem, so it is kind of like the perfoliate. But the perfoliate bellwort is smaller, and the petals are grainy on the inside. This plant right here is not native, but it's an interesting plant. It's called purple vetch, and it has the little purple flowers on it. It's in the pea family. But what makes this interesting is that it has what we call an extra floral nectary. And there's little black dots on there that give off a nectar. It attracts ants, and the ants come there to drink that nectar. If there's any butterfly eggs or any pests that may be trying to eat this plant, the ants would attack them or eat them. So this is why the plant likes to attract the ants to it. So we started here at the parking lot, and we came up here. We went down that black and white striped trail. We went up the west shore, came around along the lake, went around the peninsula, and made our way back.